Alrighty, welcome to this month's FN Roundtable. Today I'm joined by Tom and Mac. Nice and early over there in Bali. Thanks for joining us, Mac, today. And what we're talking about is specifically progress. And we're going to be talking about different ways to, I guess, set expectations and measure progress, but also what to do if you feel like you are not making progress, but you're making all the right efforts. And I thought a way that we could start this is to actually define what progress is. And I did do a bit of a little Google search. And the definition of progress is advancement to a further or higher stage. Okay. It's essentially growth, development, usually to a better state or condition, and improvement. Right. So it's quite a broad definition and concept that I think if we can get ourselves and our clients and the listeners to really think about what progress is based on that definition and how they can reflect on their actions and how they are progressing with their I guess their energy levels, with how their habits are feeling a little bit easier, then they can start to go, actually maybe I am making progress, but it's not in this way that maybe wasn't attainable in the first place, or it was unrealistic, or maybe I've got the definition of progress a little bit wrong anyway.
Tom, you want to start?
Yeah, where to start? I think a lot of people are guilty of, like you mentioned, that fact, like that idea of understanding what progress is over time. I think people often are guilty of zooming in a bit too much on it. So like if you ask them what progress means to you, it's okay, like progress is about me doing this in 4 weeks, in 6 weeks, in 12 weeks, instead of what am I going to do in 2 years be in a better place than I am today.
Yeah, I think they also only use a single metric of progress. And I think the classic one we're going to keep referring to today is likely weight loss. And how fast that number on the scale is dropping.
Yeah, I also think that people fail to consider the life they want to live when thinking about what progress is. Like, it's just, I want to lose weight, but how is this actually going to move me towards an existence that is appealing to me, or maybe aligns with my ideal self, or what have you? But just to sort of take a step back as well, like through the definition that you listed, Josh, or you mentioned, progress can be so many things. And if we zoom in a little bit and look at nutrition related progress, we have a few broad categories. We have things like confidence and understanding of nutrition. We have things like reduced food guilt and anxiety, increased flexibility. We have increased culinary skills. We have an expanded nutrition toolkit of meal and snack ideas and options. We also have, obviously, body composition change, and that can be measured with the scales. It can be measured with subjective perceptions. So even if we're going to look at progress from a body composition perspective exclusively, we need to also remember that scales are just one of many, many ways we can actually assess that. That's all I'll say to begin with. I'll leave it there.
Yeah, I like those, Mac. Is actually going back to what you were saying before about like the goal setting part of things as well. Is in my initial consult with clients, I actually go, what is your goal? But then I actually ask them, how would life be different as a result of achieving this goal? And how would you act, think, and feel differently? And what that gives us is more ways to measure progress. If you're feeling more confident in yourself, but also in your food choices, if you're thinking about food less, if you're able to eat out socially without having to stress about it, they're all signs that you are making progress rather than just a number on a scale.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of people, at least, long-term like weight loss or health seeking is really just an exercise in self-efficacy. So like the more variables you give yourself a chance to succeed with, and the more direct control you have over that set of variables, the easier you're going to find that progress, and the more you're going to find it builds you up and makes you feel better. Instead of, if you just pick the singular variable and something externally happens to shift it, perceiving yourself as a failure or having done the wrong thing for doing so.
Yeah,
I like that one, because I think it's sort of that idea of don't put all your eggs in one basket. Like if you put all of your eggs in the scales, and you go out on the weekend with your friends and have a salty meal, and then on Monday you're 2 kilos heavier for reasons completely separate to body fat mass, your self-efficacy or your sense of positivity is going to be diminished, and thus your self-efficacy. But I also really like the questions that you mentioned there, Josh, because like you said, they expose, or I think from the perspective of the person we're working with, in this case, the client, they give them the opportunity to actually explore what they want from nutrition a little bit deeper, rather than just assuming the intermediate goal that they come to you with is indeed all there is to it. It actually provides that opportunity to question it, and maybe through that process be able to maybe adjust or reframe it if it is necessary, or if it would be more desirable to do so.
Yeah, I love how you mentioned the intermediate goal. I was going to start to bring up the goal hierarchy there as well. And for anyone who doesn't know, anyone who doesn't know what the goal hierarchy is a lot of people come to us with the intermediate goal, and it might be to lose weight, or to improve energy levels, or to improve performance in the gym. But it sits right in the middle of this intermediate goal, and it's not a very strong type of goal. What we want to try and do is get to the level above. Okay, it's a much deeper reason why someone wants to achieve a certain goal, and it's based on their identity and their values. And it's called a superordinate goal, but that's the really nerdy version. I just call it the anchor goal. And what we can then do is, once we've got that anchor goal, the person that you want to become, we can then break that down into many different little sub intermediate goals, and essentially many roads lead to Rome that way. So if you, for example, aren't making progress towards the number on the scale, there's other ways that you can, keep making progress towards this person that you want to be, that anchor goal.
Yeah, because I think if we want to talk like goal theory, right? The fitness industry has this horrendous hangover from the whole SMART goals system. And I think what that's done is inadvertently encourage us to pick arbitrary, almost meaningless goals. Like an incredible amount of people I work with come to me going, yeah, I want to weigh this weight. And then when you interrogate it, you ask, like, why is that the case? Often it'll be high in like that set of 10. So it might be like 59 kilos, 69 kilos, 79 kilos. And we've sort of attached and derived this random significance to this number, when you go deeper, there's actually no real justification for that. And it's actually about that like bigger picture and those more like superordinate ideals.
Yeah, it's why we keep love that 5 whys activity. Why is 59 kilos or 69 kilos, that's 79 kilos? Why is that important to you? I just want to be under 80. But why is that important to you? And just keep delving away. And if they don't really know why, then it's like, it's not a very strong type of goal. And if we can get that to a really deep reason why someone wants to achieve something, they're more likely to follow through with the action plans. But if it's not meaningful, then they're probably not going to follow through with the action plans.
Right. So what you're doing there, Josh, is you are uncovering more meaningful points of motivation, if you will, or sources of motivation to help create more meaning and significance for an individual, for a goal to an individual. Therefore, and also you're identifying other means that you can move towards that ideal self through this process of questioning. So you realize it's not just the one off fat loss, for example. We can work on confidence. We can work on being more flexible with nutrition, and that's moving us towards our ideal self. So even if the weight loss in that moment, for the past week or so isn't playing ball, we're not going to feel super negative, because we can then pivot and focus on the positives that are being achieved through the other areas of improvement that are desirable.
Yeah, and I think a big part of that's also understanding the nature of the metrics. Like if you understand body weight as a metric, it's a pretty trash one. There's a lot of noise. You need a lot of data to actually make informed decisions. Alternatively, if you have some behavior-focused goals, they're things which people comparatively have far more control over. There's a lot less like nuance associated with interpreting them. They can still sort of have a like quote unquote like bad day, but still have an opportunity to work towards those things. And I think that also makes a massive difference too.
Yeah, actually, even
really
what you just
point.
mentioned there, Tom, is that sometimes like you can also, if you are so obsessed with with a external metric, let's say, for example, weight loss and losing 5 kilos, you can get to that by doing some really dumb shit. All right. And it's not actually linked to your values and the person you want to become. Right. You could do really restrictive, like fasting protocols. You could not eat for basically a couple of weeks and you would probably lose 5 kilos. Right. But is that actually the point? Like, what's the point of actually being a lighter human being? And that's what we want to try and get deep down to. Because, yeah, you might have made progress towards the scale weight, but you haven't made progress in any other area that's actually important to you. Whereas you could be making progress towards your values and living in alignment with that, but not actually losing any weight. And like, what's more important to you?
The other thing is, like, even if you lose that 5 kilos, because a lot of the things within that are out of your control, and because you can do it in several dumb shit ways, this can leave you actually worse off. You might have lost 5 kilos, but for example, you might have a dependence on macro tracking, or particular foods might be defined as bad, and there's all this food anxiety and things like that. So I think, long story short, is all because you've lost the 5 kilos and you feel really good about that doesn't mean that you're better off.
Yeah,
that's what
and I think part of that's brokered on this like faulty assumption that there is a finish line. It's like you can start living when you are this much weight. You're going to diet until this holiday. You're going to do this challenge, and you're rewarded like quite significantly, right? Because you're putting a lot of emotional and physical investment into these things. You get quite a bit of reinforcement for losing that weight that quickly, but at no stage is there just the discussion or like the problem engaged with of, hey, what happens next? When in reality, like, the vast majority of people are going to eat for the rest of their lives. There's probably a small minority who aren't going to eat for the rest of their life, and that's a separate problem. Probably go to Woolies. So, like, if this is going to be a thing that you do forever functionally, surely you need to start asking the questions of, okay, like, how can I engage with this in a way which actually takes me there, even if it's not as intensely rewarding initially.
Yeah, and that's where I like that. It's the big picture progress that we're looking at. It's the again, that person you want to become, and are you making progress towards that? I think then we may even now to start to go down the route of like, how are you actually measuring progress? And like you said, if you're only measuring it based on one metric and it being weight loss, like, you're possibly setting yourself up for a pretty bad time negatively. And Max posted about this before, is like, even when someone knows about the fluctuations in the scale weight, right, and we can tell them over and over again, like, it does fluctuate for these reasons. If they get on the scale one day after a salty meal and they've gone out for Taco Tuesday and it's Wednesday and they're a kilo heavier, that's not going to settle their anxiety most of the time, even though they know that there's reasons behind it. So that's why we need other ways to measure progress.
Yeah, and
you go, Tom.
Oh, you go back. I insist.
You go, Tom.
Now I've almost lost my train of thought. But no, I think the other thing with the scale thing too is interrogating why the scale means so much to someone, because that fixation exists for a reason. Like, I do think, as much as we the three of us can go, yeah, the scales suck, like, I don't know why we're using them, I think it's disingenuous to then tell people, hey, stop caring about it. But instead go, okay, like, where does that feeling come from? Like, is that anchored to a negative experience when you were younger? Does that come from like parental pressures? Like, what does the part of you care about with the scales, and what does that need for you to be able to be satisfied and content and not be like anchored so much to that?
I think people view it as the only like practically viable objective measure of fat loss, even though it's not really measuring fat loss per se, and it's full of acute limitations and variables, and its validity as a marker of fat loss, especially in the short term, really sucks. So if we were to sort of say, how are people going to assess, and remember I was saying before, like, in terms of progress, there's different ways we can assess it. There's three categories. Well, there's broadly a few categories. One of them being the body composition side of things. If we were going for fat loss, I would say if you're cool with weighing yourself, look at trends over time, like weekly trends or weekly averages, and compare that to the week before. But then you want to have an array of other indications and markers, and you want to consider them all together globally. So for example, I had a call with a client yesterday who hasn't lost any weight in the past week, but he's down on a belt size. Also getting comments from others, feels significantly leaner. There was also one other pretty pivotal indication which has escaped me, but there were several indications of fat loss despite the scales not playing ball. But there was also a few confounding variables being identified. So this guy is in a really busy phase of work. He's just being promoted, so there's a lot of stress and poor sleep. So taken together, there's basically a perfect storm of body fat loss in the absence of scales playing ball in the immediate future. So what we want to do is we want to have those other markers there as well. So we're not just relying on scales exclusively, because if we're just relying on scales exclusively, we're going to get a misleading picture, because the scales can sometimes not tell us exactly what's going on. Like, he was so confident that he's got cleaner, essentially, despite the scales not playing ball. Tom?
I think, Mac, you raised a really nice point there, which we could probably like flesh out together. Is like you've said, the scales didn't play ball that week. And I very often have people say to me, oh, my body weight didn't drop this week. And then when you actually look at the data, it has, like, the average has shifted 100, 200 grams. You know, there's a new low that week, or the top weight is a little lighter. Over what kind of period do you guys tend to look for movement on the scales to define, am I stagnated or am I just progressing slowly?
For me, it's 3 to 4 weeks of scale weight stability before I would start to look at potentially investigating whether a lack of fat loss has actually been the case, and then troubleshooting from there. In a week, I don't really give a shit. And I don't give a shit full stop if there are plenty of other markers that are telling me that body fat has been lost, and or there are also numerous variables that could be confounders, like, oh, you know, I just did a work trip and I'm freaking exhausted, and, you know, we had KFC on the way back, and I'm like, oh, okay. I'm not saying that from a calorie perspective. I'm saying that more from the effects that might have on gut content, total body water. But yeah, so that's, I guess, from my standpoint, that's the more body composition, more specifically fat loss side of the equation. But then we can also remember that we can actually, and this is one thing I really, really like, because it actually can inadvertently result in the body composition changes or the fat loss changes in the background as an afterthought. And that is tracking health-seeking habits. So particular habits that an individual wants to work on, or that you know, they define as being worthwhile. And often a lot of these habits actually have effects on variables that play a role in weight outcomes. So for example, if a habit was eat a fist of fruits or vegetables at each main meal, for example, this is a habit that has an effect on calorie intake due to the low calorie per bite, high fiber, and highly satiating or tight satisfying nature of plants. So therefore, but you know, you're focusing on the process and you're letting the outcome of weight loss sort of take care of itself. And you can actually look at consistency of habit implementation or adhering to a given habit or set of habits as a marker of progress too.
Yeah, I like that. And even another daily habit that people could implement is like something about daily self-care, because we talk about a lot about, you know, the stress and how that can impact scale weight as well, but even how it can impact food choices. So if someone's starting to look after themselves a bit more, you know, go for a walk, do some stretching, listen to a podcast, do some coloring, or whatever it might be, do a stretch like a ROM, like I've got a client that does that. They're all things that can help them feel a little bit better mentally, but also physically, which then may even see a bit more progress.
Yeah, I mean, the stress side of things, the headspace side of things, that's going to have a significant role in our regulation of food choices and decisions to eat and what to eat. in relation to what hunger and fullness cues are telling us, as well as our ability to make conscious decisions that consider our long-term goals and our health-seeking values.
Yeah, and just to continue on with something you mentioned, Mac, about focusing on the process and letting the outcome take care of itself. I think some people can get so fixated on the outcome that it causes more stress than it's worth. And I think what we can try and encourage people to do is, care enough about the outcome, but like also let go enough to know that it's going to happen if you focus on these processes and these behaviors.
Yeah, an analogy I've really gotten around recently is the whole like growing a plant one.
Yeah.
Like for that case, because like if you do want to, I don't know, if you're really into gardening, you want to grow a plant, you can't accelerate the speed at which the plant grows by giving it more and more water and fertilizer. You'll ultimately just kill it. Instead, it's about giving it the right amount, but then letting time take its course and time take you towards that goal, which I think is the big win of that process-oriented mindset, right? It's like you're accepting that you will get there as a function of time, but you can't speed up that rate of progress more than just doing the right things. So you need to derive satisfaction and meaning from doing the daily things.
Yeah. And I wanted to just mention a point that that A-Rod sent through, and we're like, we're talking about Tom before about someone says, oh, the scale didn't drop this week. Is that progress also isn't linear? Like we've all seen that diagram of like, what we expect it to be a straight line in a straight diagonal, but it's actually like a very much a squiggly line in regards to progress. And I think when that happens, what we can start to do is really focus on the behavioral side of progress. And like, Max said, are you feeling more confident in your choices? Is it easier for you to eat 5 serves of veggies per day? Are you thinking less about it? Is it more automatic? Did you have a stressful time? And, this time you only had 2 glasses of wine, whereas, last time you would have had a whole bottle of wine. Like that's also progress outside of this outcome-based metric.
I think it pushes that idea of unconditional positivity or positive regard and really trying to hone in on the wins. If we hone in on the wins, if we've got more options, firstly, then there's more avenues by which we can draw positivity from. If we draw positivity, we're reducing negativity, self-efficacy, thus motivation, willingness to continue is enhanced.
Yeah, and I think it's also, that's a nice sort of representation of the way that life isn't always conducive to perfect. Like if you have that really diverse set and you have that sort of unconditional positive regard, you have the cognitive flexibility to go, okay, I've got a Bucks weekend this weekend. I'm not going to lose a kilo, but there are still ways I can engage with this, which are goal promoting or like lead to having a fulfilling life. And part of that could mean the fact that you let loose a little bit and you go, oh, like I'm going to accept myself and just enjoy it for what it is, because this is a thing which happens very rarely and it's meaningful to me. And understand that I have the ability come Monday to turn up, have my oats in the morning and eat my 5 serves of veg, 2 serves of fruit, etc.
Yeah, and that's progress. The progress is getting back into your routine a little bit easier, whereas previously it might have took a whole week to get back into it because you got home on Sunday, you were too dusty, didn't want to prep, but you were proactive and on the Thursday got the ingredients, so you're ready for Monday. So that's a sign of progress. Again, a behavioral-based progress.
And I think, again, to use that example that you provided, Tom, was it the Bucks, was it? Or whatever it was, social event, pretty hefty one. So I think it's a big skill to assess the situation and think, okay, usual nutrition expectations and standards, probably not possible. So I'm going to adjust those expectations and standards, but I'm going to adjust them to an area that is feasible. And then from there being like, well, I can't control everything. I can't adhere to that usual target, like, where I control all these variables and tick all these boxes and what have you. But you then focus on the things that you can control, let go of the things that you can't control. And by adhering to, by doing that behavior of, letting go of some things, focusing on things you can control, being positive about it, again, you've created avenues for additional positivity to be derived from. And then you just go through that cycle of the self-efficacy motivation thing that I mentioned before, which I won't go into.
And I think the level on that, right, is like you're a human with more than one want. And I think a lot of the time when we talk about goal setting and like progress, it implies the existence of a singular goal or value. But the reality is there's actually multiple parts of you which potentially want conflicting things. And if you can have that compassion for yourself, it lets you engage and understand, what do I want and need out of this? And then you can satisfy that element of yourself in order to continue engaging with like what your other goals are. So like if you understand that with like the use of like the bucks or the social event, you can go in reflecting on, what do I actually want to get out of it? What constitutes success? And then because you've handled that like responsibly and in a way which doesn't make you feel shame, it's much easier then to go, okay, I enjoyed that for what it was, but I also enjoy living this like health-seeking, very wholesome life. And I can just return to engaging with that.
Can I just come into this from a coach perspective and just say, I don't know how we could help our clients navigate this and get to that really deep level of understanding what progress is if we didn't do such detailed and dedicated check-ins, but also video calls. It would be so hard to navigate their stress around progress if we didn't take the time to listen to them and actually have these conversations with them and help them explore the bigger picture. Like, I'm so glad with what we have as a service, all right, that it's not just a 5-minute check-in, all right, that we actually do take the time to listen to our clients, their concerns, but also help them highlight the positives. Like, I just want to take a minute to say how proud I am of what we do at FNC and how we help our clients, because it's going to really help them manage their stress and their emotional health and their social health, and not just go, you know what, 2 weeks in a row, you didn't hit your, sorry, you haven't lost weight. Let's drop your calories back by 200 and increase your steps by 2,000.
I don't know how coaches provide a helpful service unless they're doing consistent video calls that, you know, are not just quick 10-minute calls, but you're actually getting to know the client and listening to them and helping them explore their thoughts. Like with nutrition coaching, I've said it before, like it's no joke. Like there's risks involved in manipulating your nutrition. And, you know, when we think about total health, if we are so fixated on progress and we're not listening to exploring ideas and we're not taking the time to get to know our clients, I feel like the risks on impacting another facet of total health negatively, whether that be social health, you know, psychological health, even financial health, I feel like that's so high. So I'm just completely perplexed and puzzled by the idea of, you know, I've got 200 clients and I do all my check-ins in one day and I don't do any calls. I'm like, how do you actually provide value and keep your clients safe with that? I don't understand it.
If I can be even more selfish than that, how do you find it remotely enjoyable?
Yeah.
I feel really lucky because I just like doing my job.
Yeah.
But the reason I like doing my job is because I get to interact with like interesting people and I get to sort of problem solve and talk through things with them and like engage with them. So
Yeah.
if I had 50 people I was sending macros to, I'd be like, this sucks.
Yeah, no wonder those,
Yeah,
and they're the coaches that speak really, like you can tell on social media, they're so frustrated with their clients. Like, I fucking told you this a million times. Like, yeah, well, obviously you didn't get across to them in the right way, right? Like just telling someone what to do won't change anything.
You did use the tools that you've been provided with.
Yeah, exactly right. But I think if we like, again, a great part of our job is helping them highlight areas that they have made progress in. If we go back to what the theme of this podcast is you couldn't do that with just a quick Google form check-in. Like we can really help our clients find what progress is there. If we keep going back into what progress is, sometimes clients have unrealistic expectations of progress and even the rates of progress. They often, like, how often do you see a form, I want to lose 10 kilos in 6 weeks? or unless you're 160 kilos, probably not going to happen. Like, but like we're looking at 0.5 to 1% per week if you're looking at weight loss.
I think the thing you said there, which I found really interesting, Josh, was the idea of like an unrealistic goal versus an unrealistic goal in a time frame. Because I would almost argue, like if you say to a client, yeah, how would you feel if you lost 3 kilos in the next 10 weeks? Almost everyone would be like, I'm disappointed. But if you told them, how would you feel about being 15 kilos lighter in 12 months? They'd all be stoked. So I think at least a lot of the people I talk to when we onboard them are like overly ambitious in the short term, but also not necessarily sufficiently ambitious when we're talking what they can achieve down the track.
Yeah.
I think to add to that as well, like unrealistic goals can be broken up into 2 categories: rate of progress as well as the goal itself. And when we're going into rate of progress, that would be like, how much weight do you expect to lose per week? Expecting that to be linear, expecting to never encounter speed bumps and have quote unquote off weekends or what have you. But then I think it all starts from whether the goal is realistic and actually value aligned. So when we're looking at the goal itself, whether that's realistic or not, I think it can be broken into, does it fit within the lifestyle? Does it fit within values and preferences? Like for example, I've had a client, and I always use this client as an example. Years ago, I had a client who was a pastry chef. It's like, okay, this person, this is their job. This is their biggest hobby in life. They love pastries. They're always doing this. A goal of, hey, I want to get shredded and step on stage as a bodybuilder. The things that are going to be required to do that, it's just not a realistic goal in the context of that person's lifestyle, preferences, and values. So I think that's the first bit that we want to look at, whether a goal is feasible. And I think for people like that example I mentioned before, it's like, well, I'm sorry, but I'm not sure that this goal is really for you. And I think it's important to have that discussion, but not tell them. Like, I'm not going to tell them like I just did then, but sort of allow them to explore that on their own and create a space for them to do that and come to that answer on themselves, on their own. Yeah, like I just want to clarify, me being like, no, that's a terrible goal for you.
Yeah.
That's a terrible idea for me to do that. They're just going to go somewhere else. And, telling people what to do is not the way to go. Anyway.
I was about to challenge you on that, Mac. I was about to say, hang on. Are you just telling people, no, you're stupid? No, because I genuinely think there is merit in exploring your goal and realizing it wasn't what you thought it would be. And I think especially with weight loss, you get like almost everyone has like a happy range for their body weight to sit in. And if you get heavier or lighter, you're going to notice it. Like whether that's you become super food focused, really hungry, you sleep badly, your libido drops, whatever. Or you just feel quite large, you're not sleeping as well because you might have sleep apnea or whatever. And I think sometimes there is merit in having the educated conversation going, hey, I don't think you might enjoy this, but I'm happy to take you there so that individual can then realize, hang on, going from having like a 4-pack to a 6-pack isn't actually my solution. Because I do so, the rest of my life starts to pay a larger toll.
Yeah, I think as what we can do as coaches then is highlight, okay, if this is what you want to do, here are some of the steps you've got to take, and here are some of the things you've probably got to sacrifice. And so like, is it worth, is the trade-off worth it? I had a conversation with one of the guys I mentor yesterday about this, is if a client really wants to lose weight and they're already maybe a lighter human, they're going to have to sacrifice a lot of things. Saying like, are you willing to, sacrifice some of your social meals and a couple of Aperol spritz on the weekend or a couple of beers for the boys? Like, is it worth it? And again, Tom, like you said, some of them are going to say yes. And we've got to, coach them through that. And it's only through them experiencing that, how it affects their social and emotional health, that they do feel a little bit lighter, but the quality of life sucks. And they're like, you know what, you're right. Like, but we can't just tell them that. They've got to experience it on their own and go, you know what, being 70 kilos wasn't actually as good as I thought it was going to be. Like 72 to 73 was actually pretty good because I had that sweet spot between like physical health and social life.
Yeah, to be like, we have to respect client autonomy and understand that they're the expert of their life, and they, they're going to want to do what they want to do. And, if it's safe for us to work with them, or at least we should kind of help them through that, or help them explore that idea. But sort of back to the whole idea of feasible goals or not, I think people don't consider the practical sacrifices or behaviors that are required to achieve that goal. They don't really think about them enough. Like, for example, Jess, my partner, was like to me last night, she's like, I think I want to do a triathlon. I'm like, okay, so have you thought about where you're going to ride your bike around here in Bali? Have you thought about you're going to spend like the 4 to 6K or whatever it is on a push bike? Where are you going to go swimming? There's not really any pools around here. Like, kind of haven't thought about the goal and everything, but hasn't really thought about the sacrifices and practical, like, you have to do this things. And therefore that would open the gates to maybe the goal being adjusted. So rather than doing the triathlon, I might do this other thing instead. Although she's still quite fixated on the triathlon. But anyhow, that's a story for another day.
I think often, like, I reflect on this. Yeah, this is a don't let the girlfriends listen. But something I often ask or reflect on is like, do you want the goal, or do you want the idea of the goal? I know from my sort of background in like doing a lot of like powerlifting stuff, so many powerlifters were people who weren't quite good enough at sport in high school. So like, you don't actually want to be good at powerlifting. You just want to be good at a sport and have people give you like positive reinforcement for being good at a thing. And I think it's really important to tease that out, because people end up going down this path that either they're like unhappy with, or they don't realize they're paying too much of a price for. And then when they get there, they go, hang on, I just feel empty, because there's always someone who's eventually better than you. And you've paid this price for a thing you didn't actually want that much.
Yeah. Essentially, they want the goal, but not the behaviors. They want the end result, but not the day-to-day. And like, I think I told you this time, like, recently I just realized that I want a stronger back squat, but I don't want to do all the stuff to get a stronger back squat. So I just go, you know what? I don't want to do it anymore. Like, that's okay.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of this comes back down to is like aligning your actions and your goals with your values, but getting clear on your values and what's important to you first. So rather than going the whole like, oh, my goal is to be, lose 5 kilos, why, go, okay, what do I value in life? What are my priorities? And does this goal link back to that? If not, what can I do instead to find a way to improve my nutrition and make progress with my nutrition in alignment with the goals and the person I want to become? In the values and the person I want to become.
Yeah, because I think it's really common to talk to someone, like talk to a client when you just started working with them, and you're like, what are you willing to do? And they're like, yeah, I'll give 110%. I'll do anything, coach.
Put me in, coach.
But
that's the biggest red flag there is.
Well, but also, like, we all have things we're not willing to do for our results. That bar just shifts depending on who you are. Like, if you talk about sports performance, you might say I'm in 100%, but it's like, no, like, you're not cheating and using anabolics. You're not doing anything dodgy. So there's still like a constraint on this is how much, and these are the values with which I'm willing to engage with this. So like to use your back squat like analogy, you've gone, hey, like, I want to be good at this, but I want to be good at this within these constraints, and I'm only willing to do this much work and make this many sacrifices. That's like totally okay, because you've just reflected on it and decided, hey, here is my line of effort and application. Because it exists for everyone. There's nothing like morally weak or wrong about that. You've just got the insight to realize, hey, mine is here. It's not here.
Yeah. Actually, and what you just mentioned before about what are you willing to do is A-Rod's this thing through is like, what are you ready to change and what are you not ready to change as well? That's really important for our clients to go, like, again, we go back to the example, like, are you ready to give up these things? If not, then that's okay. Are you ready to do this? If not, that's okay. Like, there's no one's forcing you to do this, but also your goals don't have a deadline. Like, none of our clients, most of our clients aren't weight class athletes. Some of them are. We have weightlifters and boxers and whatnot. We do work with some people that do have weight-based sports, but most of them, just a general fat loss client, does not have an end date. So what's the rush?
Yeah, and I think it's also like, that's not to say we want to coach you forever. Like there's no rush because we want to sort of string you out for as long as possible. You can still, like, I think it makes more sense for us to achieve those skills with you and then let you do that on your own, knowing you've got 5 kilos to go, but you're totally capable of taking care of that yourself.
Yeah, but if the date is too close, that's going to put extra stress on you, and that's going to probably cause you to do some dumb shit. And a week of no progress could get you to scramble and go, shit, like I've got to cut this out again. I've got to cut more out, like bigger deficit, more steps. Like it's just, yeah, I think when you put that pressure on yourself, it makes it a lot worse. Have you guys read the book, The Gap in the Gain? Really great. Like it's a very short book, but I really, really like it. It essentially, the message of it is a lot of the times we measure ourselves in the gap. So between where we are now and where we want to be, basically our ideal, right? But what we want to try and do is actually measure ourselves backwards in the gain. So who we were, in the past. And that's how we measure progress rather than where we want to be. All right. So a great way to do that is to always measure backwards.
Of like a very similar vein, the meditation app I use has a meditation called You Are Living the Ideal Life. And it speaks about how there is likely a past version of you or someone else who would look at your life and be like, I'd give anything to be there. So yeah, it's encouraging you to sort of reflect differently on where you are there. Nodding very profoundly there, Mac.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm in agreement.
Yeah. Anything else, lads? Anything else on progress that we can mention? Okay, actually, let's say for example, we go back to the example maybe of weight loss, and weight loss is stable. All right.
Yeah, that's
what do we do? What do we do there? So we obviously want to make sure that the client is being adherent to the behaviors that are going to lead to the outcome.
Yeah, so I think the first thing to do is actually ensure that progress isn't being made. So a client might say, I haven't made any progress, but is what they identify as progress realistic? Is it within feasible ranges? And then, okay, even if scales aren't playing ball, what are the other markers saying? And what is the overall conclusion? If the conclusion is we're still not making progress, then we've got to think, okay, well, could we just give it a little bit more time? Is it because of non-adherence? And if yes, does the client feel confident that that was just a small blip, like, I just had a really busy week and this coming week I've got more of a clear run, what have you? Or is it a case of, I've been really adherent, I don't know why I'm making progress, in which case we would then look at troubleshooting. Now, if we're talking about a fat loss goal, fundamentally, we're looking at the calorie deficit principle, and we shift the question to, why isn't this plan working, or why isn't whatever working? And we say, well, why is this client not in a state of caloric deficit consistently on average over time? Once we start off with that question, we could then look into things and try and identify why that might be the case. Has there been changes to lifestyle, non-exercise activity, or that incidental movement side of things? Is there additional calories that are coming in that we're not aware of? If they are tracking, is there errors and misreporting going on? And looking at things like food logs, asking questions, exploring weekend eating, can try and uncover some clues. And then whatever the clues are, or the area that might need to change, you can then sort of look at attacking that, and then going from there.
So basically doing an audit. So if you're not making progress, do an audit. First and foremost, are you sure you're not making progress? The second thing is, okay, are you actually adherent to, again, if we go to the caloric deficit, so are you eating as much as you think, or is there some extras sneaking in there? Okay, if there are, then let's manage those extras. Are you moving a little bit less? Okay, if that's the case, then maybe go back to your normal physical activity, or move a little bit more? All right. Yeah, Mac.
Yeah, I just think a really important question also asking there is, why do you think you're not making progress?
Mm. Yeah.
I think it's really important to explore those ideas.
The flip side of that question too is, what amount of progress would make you happy?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, because I think it's far easier to be unhappy than it is to be happy. And we're like, as humans, we're like risk averse, right? So people are far more likely to feel down about things not going 100% than they are to celebrate, hey, several of these markers actually went well this week, but I'm perceiving it as a failure because this one thing went badly. Like, it's the whole, would you be disappointed if you got 90% in a test type rationale?
Yeah, it's that negativity bias. And also it's that combine that with hedonic adaptation, where, okay, you lost half a kilo, but then you're not happy, you want to lose another half, or you want to lose an extra 600 grams. Like, it just, you don't get very, like, I think you said, Tom, like, once you squatted 200 kilos, you were like, well, what's next?
Yeah. Well, it's funny. Like, I look back on it and like literally I did it again last weekend, right? Like, when I squatted 250, I felt less excited than when I squatted 200 for the first time. And part of it is just the fact that you just need more and more, like, as you sort of, and I think the problem is, for a lot of people, that manifests in doing really extreme things. Luckily, I haven't done anything extreme ever. Nothing unreasonable at all, but it's worth thinking about, in that, like, with weight loss, part of the whole point of having an end goal is that it ends. So if you're chasing decreases in the scale weight, are you going to habitually watch the scale for the rest of your life to make sure it stays bang on that number? What happens when it goes up 500 grams? Do you perceive that as a failure?
Yeah. And maintenance is like plus minus 3%, right? So if you get down to 69 kilos, maintenance is between, I think, like 71 and 72 and 69. So like that's perfectly normal to fluctuate between those ranges.
I think that example you've provided there, where someone's still so fixated on the scales despite, meeting their initial weight loss goal or fat loss goal, what have you. I think that highlights when a goal, or at least the way it's approached, can actually not be a positive thing overall, like in the big picture scheme. Because, someone's lost the weight that they wanted to lose, but now they have this dependence on the scale weight number every single morning, and it's getting in the way of their enjoyment in life. They're thinking about food more. They might avoid things like going on holidays and hang out with friends. And I think that is a situation where, like having, again, like the consultation thing with coaches, like we were discussing before, I feel like that's when it really becomes important, because it allows us as coaches to be privy to those things accumulating, or it also allows us to kind of get inside the head of clients and what they're thinking, and otherwise we wouldn't know, that they're going down this path, and we would be able to intervene in time. And then if, a client is in that situation, it can provide the opportunity for them to explore that and maybe come to the realization on their own accord that, I don't need to be so focused on the scales, or because the conclusions I'm drawing by looking at the scale weight fluctuations aren't necessarily true to reality.
Oh, sorry, I was waiting for Tom to say something.
No, sorry, I had something really profound to say, and then I just got so wrapped up in what Mac was saying. It was.
Yeah, I was like, he's thinking about something. I'm gonna let him talk, but he didn't have his hand up. I know that Tom wants to talk when he's got his hand up.
Hey, you're the school teacher. I'm the student.
That's it. That's
true.
Student doctor.
Yeah, well, let me get my stethoscope.
Like, I think just exploring more about these things with our clients is just so important, and helping them actually. I think a different title for this is not actually progress; it's about expectations, and probably goals. So maybe we'll call it goals, progress, and expectations.
Ooh, yeah, it's come back. Sorry. To if I can tie in that goal thing with the actual, like, have you stalled? I have the metabolic adaptation discussion with people. I'll, like, not all the time, but like a reasonable amount of time. And honestly, I think it's really rare, but I think diet fatigue is far, far more common. So I think, like, on what Max said about like appraising stagnation, have you stagnated because you're doing the protocol 100% and things aren't quite, and it's just not enough? Or have you stagnated because you've spent the last 10 years of your life feeling like you have to lose weight, sort of half-assed dieting because you feel like that's what you're compelled to do because you're in a slightly bigger body, and because you are so tired and so food focused over it, you're like unknowingly unadherent, or you just do things unconsciously, like you have the, you grab the handful of chips and those kind of things. Because I honestly think there are far more people who struggle to get their results because being consistent is difficult.
Yeah.
Then there are because, hey man, like your NEAT's dropped and you're just so metabolically damaged. Oh.
Yeah, it's that diet fatigue without getting results, which is a terrible combination. Like it's like you said, it's through most likely being unknowingly not adherent. But it's when we go back to, you do the audit. Okay, like, are you sure there's nothing extra being added in? Like, rather than us as a coach being, fuck, like I've got the deficit numbers wrong. Like, then there's probably something else going on.
The perception of metabolic adaptation or diet or calorie deficit induced reductions in how many calories your body expends as like a physiological response to that scenario, that masks in reality why people stall, which is, hey, I've been doing this for 10 weeks. I'm just pretty over it. I'm starting to lose focus on the root goal because other things are becoming more appealing. It's getting a little bit old. The novelty's wearing off, the diet novelty. So I'm starting to be a little bit more lax, and there are cracks appearing, and therefore there are additional calories coming into the mix or what have you.
Yeah.
Realistically, in the real world, unless you're dealing with people who, I mean, we would never deal with this anyway, but, think about like the Minnesota starvation study, like how skinny and how much weight those people lost, before we saw like actual physiological changes that would affect further weight loss. In the case of most of the clients we work with, like, you're not getting anywhere near that sort of level of drasticness, and it's a non-factor.
And I think the other thing of that is people like to lean on it to explain acute changes or fluctuations, when in reality, like, if you're losing half a kilo a week on average, it would look like you going from half a kilo to like 350, 400 grams. Like it's a progressive thing, which is going to increase as you get really, really lean, as opposed to just one day the weight loss genie like snaps their fingers and is like, you can't lose weight anymore. Sorry, bro. Those are the laws. Like, that's the law. I don't make the rules.
Oh, that's a great one. I like that analogy. Good stuff.
Yeah. But then macro coach Steve's coming in being like, yep, this is metabolic adaptation. What we'll do is, okay, we'll reduce calories by an extra 13.25%, and then we'll increase steps by an extra 1,223 per day to counter this physiological change.
My favorite one of that is the dieting on 1,200 calories didn't work for me. Dieting on 1,800 calories worked for me. It's like, yeah, because you were probably eating about the same calories, but because you weren't tracking to necessarily a really high quality, or you were inadvertently over consuming because you were so hungry all the time. Like, that's not your coach isn't magical for like fixing metabolic adaptation. Like, I dislike how people market that as coaches. That you just found a system which is easier for you to be adherent to, which obviously is going to help you get better results.
Yeah, it's why we always want to try and diet our clients on as high calories as possible, right? Because they're going to be more likely to stick to it. All right. So it's like,
Yeah.
like you said, the 1800 calorie plan that you follow is better than the 1200 calorie plan that you don't follow.
Well, a bigger deficit is not better. And a big reason for that is because adherence is dependent also on how hungry you are and how food focused you become. And when calories are stupidly low, both of those variables are not going to be shifted in favor of adherence.
And I think that's also where, if you're doing the whole like customized coaching thing, asking someone what rates of weight loss have you previously experienced and had success with can be a really useful conversation, because we can gain information from the data, sure, like, and the science, but your own personal experience is like so useful. Some people find they can lose a kilo a week consistently for 5 or 6 weeks, and then come week 6, everything falls apart. You know that. You've had an opportunity to learn that. You can use that information to define what future approaches you take, whether that means you deliberately lose weight a little slower or you implement a refeed around that week 4, week 5 mark. So like looking at your previous weight loss experiences too can help troubleshoot where you see yourself having problems now.
Yeah, that's great. I always like to ask my clients, like, what's worked for you in the past and what hasn't? Most of the time it's what hasn't worked, because they're coming back to us, obviously. But yeah, 2 big questions I like to ask them in the initial consult.
And what can you learn from those past experiences?
Yeah. So much of our thing is just asking more questions. Like, it's asking more questions to our clients and then helping them unpack these things as well, because they're going to realize these things when they're saying it, like, oh shit, I didn't even think about that until you just asked me that question, rather than, like you said, macro coach Steve dropped the like 13.7%, increasing this. Like, let's actually explore it a bit more.
Yeah, and I think part of the, if I can add an independent, I think part of the problem with the macro coach Steve vibe is it implies there is something inherently wrong with the individual. Like I've worked with a few people who've done like bodybuilding previously who have this like trauma around, oh no, coach is going to slash my calories because I'm not doing well enough. And it's like, no, like we're just manipulating external variables here.
Yeah. All right, lads, I think we've probably capped out time. Like I said, I think we've changed it from just progress to now goals, expectations, and progress. Any closing thoughts?
Just one closing thought. I was more satisfied when I first squatted 400 kilos compared to when I first squatted 500 kilos.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's your next goal, Tom? Run 150 Ks in a day?
Maybe I might just really double down on trying to become enlightened. I think that's the next logical step. I'm gonna go down like the fitness spiritual route, and I'm gonna start empowering young kings.
Yeah.
To turn away from the left and become alpha males. So I think I've just exhausted the other options. Like, it's the natural progression of the
There's
world.
a bit of that going on, actually. There's a bit of that going on.
I can see the shirt now. TCYK, Tom Clark's Young Kings.
Oh, classic. He'll be like, no, I'm dropping out of medicine. Decided that the government, big pharma, it's all funded. They're all out there to make us fat and sick. I'm just going to move to Bali, and I'm going to do several gut health and spiritual courses run by people who have zero formal qualifications.
No, he's got to get the PhD first so he can call himself doctor.
No, but it'll be like a PhD in like Middle English poetry or something. Like, it won't actually have any relevance. Like, don't expect it to be to make me a better clinician. Or
no one cares.
Intellectual.
No one cares that.
No.
Yeah.
Doctor.
Yeah, you just got to.
In fact, you can just put it on your Instagram and no one checks.
No. Yeah. All right, lads. Well, hopefully we help people today really clarify their expectations, what's realistic rates of progress as well, and just helping them look a little bit big picture, start to, I guess, zoom out and look at what progress looks like, try and measure backwards based on who you were before and where you've come from, rather than measuring yourself against an ideal. But even then, also just like double check that you are being adherent to the behaviors and actions that are aligned with your goals. All right, no, that's it. I was hoping you'd say something.
No.
All right,
Go to
thanks lads. I'll stop recording.